on Tobago Updates. Viewers, for the rest of the show this morning, I'm going to be chatting with former Secretary of Infrastructure, Quarries and the Environment, DIQE, and that's of course Mr. Kwesi Desvignes. No, I forgot the division title for just a second.
That's okay. It's understandable. A rose by any other name is just as sweet. Good morning, Kandace. Good morning to your viewers.
Good morning.
Of course, all those who are in Tobago, out of Tobago, it's great to be on with you this morning. Not that I didn't enjoy the last interview, but I missed your company as well.
Certainly. All right, now, Mr. Desvignes, so we're just going to get straight on into it. Now, we've had quite a few things that are within the space,
Yes.
and I just want to get started with this controversial issue about town and country approvals.
Yes.
And because we're hearing from the current Secretary of Infrastructure, Mr. James, that sometimes you have to start a project without the approvals just to get it going because the process is so tedious. Now, have you been faced with that same problem when you were secretary?
That's a great and interesting way to start off, Kandace. Interestingly, one of the last major projects that we engaged in, which was the relocation of the residents, the preparation of properties for the relocation of residents for the airport development, both at Shervan and Cove. I always tell people that we did not touch a blade of grass until we had every single approval. Yes, things can be frustrating dealing with the bureaucracies, especially I remember during COVID, dealing with some of the challenges because, of course, not everyone is at work today. Things go out and get lost, so it meant developing relationships. So even to deal with some of the challenges with town and country planning, we had a Tobago Development Committee out of the Division of Infrastructure that dealt specifically with bringing all of the matters to the table. So WASA, TNTech. So even when TNTech was doing a lot of work, and they also required town and country approval when we were doing road widening development. So it was a clearinghouse of thought that allowed the preparation of agencies to say, look, I'm sending you a signal. I'm going to do this development. Let's work together to get this done, because I don't know that any agency is in the business of stymieing development. And even though it may be frustrating, yes, because the laws are there and we want to abide by the law, because Kandace, you may have done some literature at school. Hamlet was always one of my favorite Shakespeare. And Hamlet spoke about that body politic and the fact that at the time Denmark was rotting from the head. And we can't have it from the head that you're breaking the law. And yes, there may have been times in the past and the THA was found wanting on many occasions. But especially under my tenure, I tried to make it a point to abide by the rule of law as far as possible. EMA, and that's why developing very often working relationships. I remember when there was the incident at Pigeon Point, for example, where the buildings will be literally being destroyed by the coastal flooding. We had to call up the managing director of EMA to say, listen, there needs to be intervention. And there was emergency intervention. Even when we were trying to get and we'll get into the jetty at Studley Park, again, they were very clear. The EMA was clear on their role. Town and country planning is also very clear on their role. But what is the advice is, listen, you know what? We know what you want to get done. However, we have to do X and Y and Z. Mm-hmm. And as far as possible, we try to do that. So even with the airport development now not having the necessary approvals, I saw that that was something. That's something I think could have been dealt with even long before, because when we left office, as a matter of fact, for the construction of the airport, part of the cabinet minute was the establishment of an airport oversight committee that had membership from both the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government, NITCO, Ministry of Finance, and so on.
Was that committee ever in place?
Yes, that committee was in place. As a matter of fact, that committee functioned very well.
And who was the representative from Tobago?
Representatives from Tobago, there were 3 representatives to my memory. I think one has been fired. One has moved on to something else, and I don't know if the other person is there, but there were 3 persons, two senior engineers and someone specializing in PPP out of the Division of Finance. So we had 3 persons, and of course we had the line secretaries, of course, running intervention where necessary. But we had 3 competent professionals working hand in hand and addressing any issue. So even when there were the public consultations, all of these things, the Airport Oversight Committee was that first stop to ensure that the partnership that we were dealing with any of the issues that Tobago had. So they were representing on behalf of Tobago very often. Listen, you know what? I remember when there were some issues coming up in terms of the social impact. It was at that committee that we said, listen, we have to have someone specialized in dealing with this, talking to people. It can't just be, yes, we're following the law, but we have to deal with people and the individual circumstances. So the Airport Oversight Committee was functioning quite well. And, you know, sometimes I wonder, what are we in the business of now? Because as much as there are opposing parties, there's no reason at any time that there can't be dialogue. And part of the maturity of governance, and that's why I call it diplomacy, is being able to sit down. You have your views, I have my views, but we have a common objective. And we can't negotiate at any time or have dialogue at any time if it is, could you imagine, Kandace, someone pulled a gun in your face and you're trying to negotiate with the person? I mean, there's some skilled negotiators like that, but it does not create an environment for conversation. And so what I want to do...
What was the negotiations like between the people involved within NITCO and the THA for that dialogue? Give me an idea of how it's, because from what we're hearing right now, that despite the writing of letters to NETCO and that sort of thing, they are being told that they don't need to talk to the THA.
I don't know that that's true. And again, it depends on what the letters are, no matter what. And again, it comes down to, because NITCO, UDICOT, all of these companies were basically unceremoniously dismissed from Tobago. And again, we might see that, okay, Tobago is, we want to move towards autonomy. But again, we are stakeholders in a major development project in Tobago. And you may not always agree with it, but respect is important. Kandace, I don't always like the things you say or the views that you have, but I respect you and what you bring to the table, and we can have a dialogue the same way we're having right now. And I think we have to get to that level of maturity, and that is completely absent right now. Even when you hear the utterances of the secretary and even the chief secretary, there are people who call me and say, Kwesi, why are they so disrespectful? And that comes up that's a recurring theme. And then you see a picture of them laughing and smiling. I saw the launch of a crab farm. There's different things, and I wonder, but where are those dialogues? We come on TV and we talk about the challenges that we're having, but then we see them doing tours at the for the oil spill. And I'm saying, but those conversations can happen at that point. And again, and I wouldn't say that I've always agreed with the Minister of Works, and I have not always seen eye to eye on some issues. Town and country planning, let me say a special good morning to Ms. Wilson. We had our run-ins, but we are very good friends now, because at all times there was respect. And we need to bring back respect and maturity into governance in Tobago. It's completely absent.
So tell me about that relationship that existed between NETCO and the THA regarding the airport construction.
All right, so, and again, I'm happy you asked that. There were clear rules. With any project, there are clear rules. NITCO is the executing agency on behalf of the central government. The agency for the central government being the Ministry of Finance. They were leading the project. The recipients of the project, of course, will be Airport Authority, so they were stakeholders as well. Tobago House of Assembly, as a key stakeholder and representative of the people of Tobago, were a major player. So even when there were consultations, when we went over the consultation plan, I remember sitting down at meetings chaired by the Chief Secretary on occasion, chaired by myself, chaired by the Secretary of Finance on occasion, that outlined, like, listen, guys, this is where we need to go. Once there was a lot of clarity, and the Chief Secretary did take a very present role in it, this is where we are going. And there was agreement on the team, even before he went to public. Even when there were, there were discussions with NITCO that were very heated on the amount of local content to ensure, to write into the contracts, because there was a standard at the time of putting 10%, and they just used to put 10%. And I remember the Chief Secretary it was Kelvin Charles at the time, Secretary of Finance Joel Jack, and myself, sitting in a meeting at the Division of Works of Infrastructure and saying that that cannot hold. And of course, the meeting got a bit heated, but we were able to represent for the people of Tobago, and that was the main interest. So yes, you're going to build the airport, but it's not that you're going to come and do what you want, how you want. But that was a meeting where there was respect. That was a meeting where people were able to air their views, and then we were able to come to an agreement. So, and then it was very clear once we agreed on those things, the oversight committee became that clearinghouse. If there was an issue that was bubbling beyond the airport oversight committee, and we said, listen, we got a heads up that, you know what, we need the intervention of the policymakers now, then the policymakers stepped in. But you have to allow professionals to do their work. And another thing that you're seeing here now is that the politicians tend to get involved far too quickly. Respect professionals, set out a policy, whatever the guidelines are, which is absent right now. There's no clear policy from this administration, and set out a guideline, set out the parameters, and then let the professionals work. And professionals far too often in this currently are complaining that they're being disrespected and not allowed to work.
But in this situation, we're getting the indication that the THA, the current administration of the THA, so what existed during your time unfortunately did not translate or transfer to this current administration. So they're sort of left in the dark about some of the things that are happening.
And Kandace, I can tell you that I've heard some of the interviews with the secretary, as painful as they may have been, and I think he can be an excellent storyteller. And I think, in all fairness, instead of just taking what I say and what the secretary says, you should probably invite the president of NITCO to come on and have a conversation, to hear what NITCO is saying as well, so that we're not getting he say, she say, get it from the horse's mouth. And that's my recommendation on that. And I spoke about respect, because if it is your intent and on disrespecting people and saying, well, I'm the boss and it's what I see, that's not how you deal with that. That's not governance. That is a creeping dictatorship, and those are the complaints that you hear. Yes, you want to fight on behalf of Tobago, but there's something called being dead right. Kandace, if you're driving on the road and a truck is in your lane, it comes into your lane, you can't say, well, I have the right of way, and you drive headlong into the truck. You could end up dead right. Yes, you had the right of way, but the inertia of the truck is not going to stop before. So let's not end up in situations where we are dead right, or you want to be dead right. Let's get in a situation where there's compromise, there's conversation, and that comes out of a place of respect and maturity.
All right. Well, we're going to take a pause right there because we got to go for a break, but we'll be back right after this, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our conversations this morning with the former Secretary of Infrastructure, Quarries and Environment, and that is Mr. Kwesi Desvignes, as we talk about some of the things that are happening within the space now and what happened before to lead to some of the things now. All right, so now we were speaking a little bit about the airport construction, as of course the road, and specifically that Friendship Connector Road. Now, the secretary yesterday explained that, of course, they deviated a little bit from the original plan that the airport, that NITCO had presented. Now,
NITCO is pure under the Ministry of Works.
All right. So tell me about that relationship. Why? Because, of course, we know that, under the THA, roads and so on fall under the THA, it's a purview of the THA, and the current administration took it upon themselves because they see it as their responsibility. Tell me about what was that agreement that was in place? What were those conversations like? So
Kandace, if we were to just do things just because we have it, we could do it, then we'll be in a very crazy place. And I mean, we are. So let me just dial back a bit. The history of it again, the airport terminal construction was approved by Cabinet. There was a recognition that the access road is going to be a challenge, because if you deal with Stowbay Local Road, in its current configuration, we can lead to some developmental challenges, and not in the now necessarily, but in the future. Pure was brought on board because of the capacity that they had in development, and there was never an intention of the cabinet minute for the Ministry of Works or PO to abdicate or take away from or abrogate unto themselves any responsibility that is there for the Tobago House of Assembly. What I can say, again, the Secretary being the great storyteller that he is, he may have, on this occasion, he didn't exaggerate. Well, I don't know if he didn't speak very clearly on it or very real on it. The original design was a dual carriageway. So currently, picture, we have Milford Road just outside, is a single carriageway. So where you have one lane going one way, one lane going the next way. The dual carriageway was going to be 2 lanes in each direction, with a number of roundabouts and so on. And so to say that you deviated slightly, you removed an entire lane, 2 lanes really, from the project. So I don't know if that's slight.
Well, the route itself is also
The route is also different. And the reality, we are at the stage of the conceptual design. The route was not finalized. But even, and I'll give the example, Kandace, of when we did the Smithfield Connector Road. We ran into a challenge. There was an original design and layout. When we got there were some squatters who had applied for regularization and had been regularized. We didn't say, well, let's bulldoze their homes and go away. We actually went the route of helping them to ensure that the construction did not demolish their homes. We had to actually, there was one particular home I remember where we had to relocate them temporarily while we remedied some challenges, because once you put heavy equipment on the road, their foundation wasn't very good. And so we had to do a lot of construction on the home, additional cost. But we didn't just go and bulldoze somebody's home. That's not how you do development. Before we even started the construction of the road, yes, there was the conceptual layout, but the surveys were then done. And we did the topographical surveys. We got all of the levels, so we knew how the road was going to be slanted. Everything was done before we started just digging. You don't just, Kandace, you don't just jump in and say, I'm going to build a road here, and you bring an excavator and a bulldozer and you start. That's not how you do development. And as much as we would love to see the Friendship Connector Road, as much as it is necessary, it was never an emergency one. If traffic is an emergency, then the Minister of Works, Rohan Sinanan, could go to Trinidad now and say there's an emergency and build roads all over Trinidad, because there's traffic there all the time. There have been 2 carnivals, Tobago carnivals, since the emergency of Tobago Carnival. And they have gone on with the hiccups, but they have gone on without the road being built. So I don't know that it is justified to build the road because of the traffic of Tobago Carnival. So let's take that off of the table. So one, we were going to have a dual carriageway that we were not going to have to pay for. So this, now, as much as the road we may say it costs $70 million, because it's a design build finance, there is going to be some level of interest as well. I don't know if you have been told, I'm not really, the public has not been informed, what is the rate of interest? So the repayment could be $80 million, it could be $90 million, depending on what the rate of interest is. We don't know, and I wish we knew. So there has been a major deviation from the plan. And it was not, the road was not going to the back of the airport. That was one consideration, but there were also considerations to do some more land acquisition to widen Storby Local Road as well. So we were at the place at the time of looking at what would be most feasible. And again, the layout would have been done, surveys would have been done before we started. We now have a situation where a road is being built, and day by day, and even the Secretary, when he did his live, he was talking about ongoing negotiations. That's not how you do things, and that's why they're in court again. Now, do we want to be in court? Do we want to hear the teachers in court? No, because that's taxpayers' money again that is being spent, that could have been spent to do other things. So it's quite unfortunate. I mean, the other fallacy that I'm hearing, and I just want to put it on record, that the PNM is somehow involved in getting people. So the first injunction, Kandace, as you would recall, was by the EMA. The complainant was actually the conservator of forests in the Tobago House of Assembly. An agent of the Tobago House of Assembly was forced. And the information I have is that there were so many overtures that were ignored that the gentleman was left with no option but to make the complaint to the EMA. Imagine having to basically report your boss and say, well, you know what, we tried to talk to him, but you're not listening. So the EMA had to take an injunction. The Hearns, Mr. Hearn, I heard him on this program, he was forced to file an injunction because why? Because he woke up one morning and just decided to push down parts of his stable and so on. Again, that's not the way to do development. Even now, as much as the injunction was lifted, it was with the agreement that they don't touch the property of where the Hearns are currently residing. So they now had to change the route that they were using and go around. You said that they were in negotiation with the Rampasads, and you just go on and start digging into people's land without having clear agreements, and this is going to be the compensation agreement, because there are two ways for the state to acquire land, and that's by private treaty, which the Tobago House of Assembly tends to do, or compulsory acquisition, as we saw with the lands for the development of the terminal itself. Compulsory acquisition is a longer process, and they were engaging in private treaty, which is all well and good. And now the Rampasads were forced to bring an injunction to stop, because what was being done was just crazy. Could you imagine that? And you know what's the interesting thing? This land was being proposed or touted for resort. So, and by this very administration. So we say, yes, we want to develop a resort here, and then you go dig and pass a road through the land. To pass a road through the land, that's not how it's done. And again, that lack of maturity and respect, because I know of situation, even with the road from Sanxerxil to Dutch Fort, where there was encroachment on people's lands. I mean, it didn't get as far as now, but we're seeing what's happening. And to hear that the PNM is behind even the latest injunction is laughable. We have Anand Logan, who is known for his campaigns against the PNM as a representing attorney in senior counsel. And so to say that the PNM somehow convinced the Rampasads to engage Anand Logan, who hates the PNM, to bring an injunction is ludicrous. And again, the secretary is a great storyteller. And we've read some great stories in our time. It doesn't mean that there's a great big white whale out there called Moby Dick. So we need to move away from that type of governance where we're just governing by VAPs. And let's have a real plan for development. Let's develop in the right way. And yes, it can be tedious. Yes, it can be onerous. But if that's the case, then don't get into governance. And I remember even the current chief secretaries admonishing us in that way at one point when we were in the house, in the chamber, that if you find it too onerous and difficult, then get out of governance. So I want to give them the same advice that he gave to us. If you find it too onerous to follow the law, if you find it too difficult to follow the law, if you find it too hard to respect people, then get out.
Well, in that case, should the airport construction be paused at this point in time because it's still without certain approvals?
Town and country planning approval.
Yes.
And you know what I would say, and again, at no point in time was there a complaint that the road didn't have town and country planning approval. The EMA, when the
airport construction itself, I'm talking about the terminal.
But I just want to deal with it from the EMA. When they gave the terms to the CEC, it was to ensure that there's town and country planning approval. Now, if there's a complaint lodged by the EMA and it requires town and country planning approval, then so be it. Let the law be followed, and it won't be the first time, as I said, that people have been found wanting. And I think the best person, and that's why I said bring on the president of NITCO, because I'm not seized with all of the information at this point in time. I don't know if there are applications in, if there was outline approval. I can't say that at this point in time. But if I'm always the person to say, once the court gets involved, once the law gets involved. I remember when we were doing Charlottesville, the mini mall there, and we know the challenges there, that there were many. I remember as a student at university coming in and doing some surveys and talking to people, and then I had to be the secretary. I guess that's the Lord has his sense of humor to finish that project and to deal with Mr. Hercules. And the interesting thing about it is that Mr. Hercules was granted a piece of land, I think 9 by 9 or something like that. And it was said that we were encroaching on his land. And in the end, Mr. Hercules built a shop that is now encroaching on the land of the mall. So I mean, these are the things that happen. And when we brought it up with town and country planning, they said, well, works, you all do, infrastructure, you all deal with that. So there are ways to deal with things. I would recommend at any time bringing the president of NITCO, let her deal with that. But once it comes to following the law, if a complaint is lodged, if the town and country planning sees it fit that, you know what, this needs to halt until we get, then so be the case. And I have no challenge saying that. And that's for anything. And that's why, yes, it's difficult. Yes, it takes time. I remember during COVID, having challenges with even the quarry getting the blasting permits, because at the time they weren't meeting.
I want to get into the blasting permits and stuff like that, but I also want to touch, before we get there, I also want to touch on just some of the other issues in terms of there's a complaint about that $300 million road construction work that went on before the elections and so on. And some of those, I mean, we saw it being pointed out that, you know, it was quoted for so much and there were no invoices. When you go on the sites, the works are still undone and that sort of thing. What went on during that time prior to elections for those roads?
So let me be clear. There were emergency restoration works that were happening. It was not roads. There were various civil works. There was an executive council note that proposed a number of works. Just like we did have some severe weather that required intervention from the administration at the time, and they were proposed works. So many of the works that we are accused of doing or not doing, they were proposed but not yet undertaken. There were some works that were done and some works that were earmarked but never done. So to say that we did $300 million, and that's why, Kandace, you've heard about the audit reports.
Yes.
And up to this day, we haven't heard anything after all of the promises to come public with it. And I always tell people I like to give everyone a fair due. I never try to get involved. Let them do what they want, because at no time was there anything of anybody writing to a secretary to say, well, I want to do this work, or the secretary saying, yes, do that work. There was never any involvement. My role as the secretary is to liaise with the executive council. I took an executive council note to the executive, and with the idea that, listen, these are the list of works to be done. These are the estimated costs, which is what they're touting now, the $300 million. The executive council gave some approval, some covering approval to say that you can engage in some of these works, because some were already done and some were carried to be done. Not all were done. Some were done, and we stand by it. The quality of the work is there. I heard, I went to a couple of places and they say, you know, they now come and dig up the road to see if it's really 6 inches of concrete, but they will go and see that. If there have been, I saw the secretary speaking about failures. Even when failure of a wall, even when I was secretary, I remember a road being paved, and I saw that happening in Buku recently. And I drove up there, and because I got a couple of calls, I drove up and I saw the quality, and I gave an instruction to the administrator at the time that based on what I was seeing, that we cannot pay the funds to this road because it's not done well, and they had to do remedial work, and the remedial work was done. The road is still standing. In Buku, you had the contractor going on, the secretary almost calling in the contractor, doing work. It was clearly shoddy work because I don't know, because it was rushed, the mix was wrong. And then almost a year later, or just under 2 years later, they had to do over the same road. That's not how work is done. So my thing is, I have no problem holding people accountable, and we can stand by that. The works have all been done, and they can all stand scrutiny. The rate of asphalt that we were paying for is far less. So I have no challenge standing by the works that we were doing, ensuring that, one, we engage Tobago contractors, and that we solve the issues of the people of Tobago, particularly where they were severely challenged. Because there were some issues when we went and we saw, for example, a house being undermined. You might think it's just the retaining water going, but then we recognize that, you know what, and that happened in Mount St. George. The drain is actually dumping water into the house, so we had to fix the drainage network going towards that property. So there were many things, and I welcome the audit. I welcome the approach, because there's no benefit. I've built no big house. I've not migrated. I'm still right here and enjoying Tobago. But the reality is that we need to get serious about governance, and let's stop trying to gain political points or cheap political points. Submit the audit report, let the people of Tobago see what they have to see.
All right, well, I'm going to take a pause right there because we got to go for a break, but viewers will be back just after this.
10 minutes.
Oh, welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our conversations this morning with former Secretary of Infrastructure, Quarries and Environment, and that's Mr. Kwesi Desvignes. Now, I just want to get into some conversations regarding what's been going on at Study Park. Now, we know that there's been some challenges with this current administration being able to get the blasting licenses, the export license. We heard the challenges with that, where government took the decision not to give that license to make sure that instead you utilize the material for development works within the country and that sort of thing. And then, of course, we're also hearing that some of the licenses are based on the payment of royalties. And there's currently a bill of over $4 million in royalties to be paid. Tell me about that. You know, what was your experience managing Spell or overseeing Spell during your time?
All right, thanks. Very quickly, Kandace, the transition from the internal management of the quarry under the Division of Infrastructure to Spell happened under my tenure. And you see, people talk like it was done in a day or 2 days. Kandace, the first meeting I took from anyone outside when I got into office was from the then Management Committee of Study Park Enterprise Limited. And that was Thursday, the 3rd of February. And it was thought at the time that we just had to move workers and Spell could take over and everything would be good. Kandace, it took us until November of 2017 to complete negotiations with the union to start to get things going and moving from over 150 something workers at the quarry to 47 and then I think 63 workers. It took a lot of doing, and it was frustrating at times, yes, but we stuck it out and the results were there. We realized over 400% increase in productivity. We then went on to what the plans that we thought that were expired and past use. We were able to bring in a new cone on the Cedar Rapids plan that increased the productivity by, I think, 32%. We added another cone onto the Nordberg plant, increased the production by about 45% it was, so that we were able to increase production at the Study Park Enterprise Limited. We were also, at the time, I don't know if you recall, Kandace, from 2016, there was a national clampdown on illegal quarrying.
Yes.
So it meant that everybody had to get in line, national quarries, everyone had to get in line. And Spell was also forced to get in line. And it meant then that we had to do, although the quarry was operating before, we had to get survey plans, we had to get the mining plan, we had to get all of the different, we had to get OSH compliant. And Kandace, it was frustrating because I remember one time OSH said, well, your diesel tank is in a bad place, and we had to move the diesel tank from where it was for years, put it on a new platform. But we had to get these things done to be compliant. Now, currently, nationally, a mining license is granted. Yes, it's under the Minister of Energy, but there's the Director of Minerals as empowered by the Minerals Act. That's Act 61 of the year 2000. So there's now a Director of Minerals. And again, it lays out very plain what happens with all licenses, royalties. So you have your mining license and your blasting permits. A mining license is usually for a 5-year period. Blasting permit is usually for a 1-year period. And we would have submitted, and according to the law, you don't have to have a mining license in order to get a blasting permit. What you do have to have is an application submitted. And as long as you have submitted that application, you'll be considered for a blasting permit, which was the case in Study Park because there were still a couple outstanding things. And I remember going through the frustration, as I was saying, during COVID to make sure we had the blasting permits. And it was not an easy thing. Even to get the export license, we always had to demonstrate, listen, this is the capacity of Spell. And it meant conversation at various levels to demonstrate that we had capacity to meet the local needs and the national needs and export as well. I remember when we did the rehabilitation of the Barbados Bay jetty again, CC compliant. We exported to both St. Vincent and to Guyana. And the reality is, at a national level, after I think 2021, there were concerns after the, I think it was the Maruga, a lot of roads were destroyed, Miara Road, and there was a recognition that, listen, we need to hoard material in Trinidad and Tobago, and that's not just Tobago's quarry, but also the limestone quarries in Trinidad. And you know, when when I heard that the visit of the Minister of Works and the Prime Minister to the quarry was cancelled, I said to myself, but if these are the people that you want to be your largest customer, because NITCO was one of our largest customers, taking out the armored rock from us and so on, because we work with them and we brought them in and said, listen, we have this capacity, we can guarantee you that we can deliver these things and so on. But in order to get the licenses, Kandace, we had to pay up our royalties, and we had to pay back royalties as well for the years that the Division of Infrastructure at the time didn't pay. And that's just the law. Under the Act 40 of 96, royalties aren't mentioned. If it is we want to have that change, there's constitutional reform going on. Let's add that in as an adjustment. But we have to be mindful, the 4 million that we're talking about, if the THA collects that as revenue, just like they do with pay and so on, that's then netted off against the overall allocation. So not to say we're going to get more money from the royalties. So the whole talk about colonial tax, that's just nonsense. Everybody, even national quarries, which is the state quarry, pays royalties to ensure that they have their blasting permits. Every operating quarry, mining operation, anybody in the petrochemical sector, they pay, royalties are paid as per Act 61 of the year 2000.
Should we have a situation where we continue to depend or wait on permission, so to speak, from the Ministry of Energy and so on before we can, produce the rock and so on in Tobago?
No, hold on. And I wanted to be clear. We can produce all we want to. So at present, if there was, so I don't know if you're familiar with the process. Blasting is to win the rock, as you say,
Right.
called win the rocks, right? Not every quarry has to blast. Limestone could be much easier sometimes. But as long as you had a lot of material on the ground, you could be crushing material. The problem is blasting. And again, because there's a law, Kandace, the law outlines the role of the Director of Minerals, the law outlines the role of the Mineral Advisory Committee, the law outlines the role of OSH, all of these agencies. It's not just a fly-by-night, Kandace. We had to, even the transportation of explosives, we had to go through many different, we had to liaise with the Minister of National Security, because you can't just have explosives being transported on a plane, somebody bring it up on a bag or in some suitcase. That's not how it's done. So there are a lot of conversations to even have the Coast Guard involved. So to say that, should we be allowed, the last I checked, we are still the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. We are governed by the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And as much as the Tobago House of Assembly has a THA company in the mining business, we are still subject to the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And we can't act as if we are separate and apart from the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. That is a recipe for anarchy and chaos. And that anarchy and chaos is why many multilateral agencies tend to distance themselves, because they don't operate in chaos. And it's sad to see when we have our leaders speaking as if they don't know the law and they're not familiar with the fact that there are laws. We had to follow the law the same way. We went through the same difficulty of acquiring export licenses because there's a process. Could the process be easier? Yes, but let's have that discussion.
No, I mean, on the point of the export licenses, because you were able, under your tenure, you were still able to export to Guyana.
On two occasions.
About $300,000 US dollars worth of revenue came in from that. Now, of course, we know that we're not allowed to export right now. We have been unable.
And to be clear, and that's a national situation. So even in limestone quarries, there are many large contractors from Trinidad operating in Guyana, and they as well can't export. They're not allowed to export. It's a national ban.
But do you think, I mean, should we still be allowed? I mean, should there be some mechanism? Because in a case where Guyana continues to be knocking on the door for the material that's at Study Park, shouldn't there be some provision for to export to Guyana, get some foreign revenue, and reinvest it back into areas.
And Candice, I agree that the Tobago House of Assembly can be allowed to export as long as we are able to make the case that we are able to meet the demand locally. Now the construction sector has ground to a halt in Tobago because we haven't been paying contractors. But as long as we are able to demonstrate that we can meet, because the worst thing, Candice, is to go back to the place where the truckers, and it started back recently, where truckers have to line up overnight to get aggregate. You don't want that. You're starving your local construction sector, because yes, we want to export and get funds. The reality is we have to be able to see about home first. And as much as we are talking about going to Guyana, one of the challenges even with going to Guyana that we learned is that, and we were in the process of reevaluating and streamlining our operations at Spell, is that we have to be more competitive even in our pricing. So even when I heard the secretary speak about the opportunity or the potential, the information I have is that the demand was in the hundreds of thousands, and at present they can't provide that on a reliable basis. So we have to become reliable. We have to become dependable and ensure that we can meet local supply before we start talking about exporting. Because could you imagine a situation where people can't even get mixed aggregate to build their homes in Tobago? I mean, that's scary, and that's why even that collaboration would have been important, because if it is you had the Prime Minister or the Minister of Works, everybody coming on board and say, hey, listen, we have this capacity. And I remember going to a National Infrastructure Development Committee meeting and having to stand up and say those things, that Tobago can get the job done. And that's why Tobago became the supplier of NITCO for Armored Rock for the coastal projects. That's why Tobago was able to we started exporting, because one of the concerns raised was the export from Tobago, the jetty. And so again, there was always an overall plan to ensure that we can meet the needs Tobago, Trinidad, and outside. And as long as we could demonstrate that, right now the plants are failing time and time again because there's improper maintenance. And we have to have proper management structure, which includes a competent manager and management on board. I don't know what's happening there. At Spell currently, there's not that. We don't have competent management at Spell.
All right. Well, we are unfortunately coming around to the end of our conversation, but I want to thank you so much, Mr. Desvignes, for being able to be on with us and for just to share us some perspective on a whole lot of the matters that are within the space at this point in time.
It's my pleasure, Candice. Of course, the conversation is not over. There's still so much to talk about. Probably if I wasn't denied that 10 minutes at the start, we probably could have spoken some more. But I look forward to a further conversation at any time.
Certainly so much. All right, well, thank you again. And viewers, certainly thank you for being here with us. And I hope you all have a safe and wonderful day. And we see you again tomorrow. So bye for now.
I say thanks a favor to wake up and hear me neighbor. 60,000 people strong.